Okay, so good morning, everyone.
Good
It
morning. My video is not working.
oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Can you see or you can't be seen?
I can't be seen.
All right, so you'll at least be able to see the notes that I'll put up on the screen.
Yes.
Let me share those notes. Let me make sure the document's open. It is. Hold on just a second. Um, okay, share the notes. Here we go. Because it's very useful to share the notes in this particular doc because we are essentially starting in the middle of an idea that we have. um you are not allowed, if you are a worker, well, let's actually we'll do it the other way around. If you're the employer, you're not allowed to withhold the wages of a worker once they've earned their wages.
You have to pay them at the end of the day.
You have to pay them at the end of the day. Exactly. If they finish in the daytime, you have to pay that by the end of the day. We saw yesterday that there's a machlokas that if they finish in the middle of the night, do you have to pay by the end of the night, or do you still have the next day? Because there was a machlokas between Rav and Shmuel. Shmuel was like, well, listen, the Torah says that you have until the end of the day. The day begins at night. So if the person finishes their work at night, you have until the end of the next, daytime, daylight hours in order to pay the person. Whereas Rav says, no, you have to be done already. But in any event, the point is that we've seen now at the end of the day yesterday, we talked about whether or not these rules apply to certain categories. One is, what happens if instead of you being the employer and me being the employee, I rent you my cow? Do you still have that? Are all the obligations still applicable? Or is there a more narrow group of prohibitions that would apply? What if instead of my being Jewish as the employee, maybe the employee is not Jewish, he's a ger toshav, or she is a ger toshav, a non-Jew who is living and dwelling among you. And depending on your definition of the ger toshav, it could be that they are fulfilling the seven Noachide mitzvot. It could just be that they don't eat, that they don't worship idols. And it could also be that a third definition is that they fulfill all the mitzvot except that they eat not kosher. So those are different possibilities. And of course, the reason that we say eat not kosher is specifically something that a ger toshav would do is because the Torah tells us specifically that if you have unslaughtered meat, you should give it to the ger toshav. So that's why that's specific. But again, so do we say that all those prohibitions apply? We saw three different viewpoints. Our Mishnah said that when it came to rentals, all the prohibitions apply. But when it comes to a ger toshav, only the prohibitions that are in Dvarim, that are talking about prohibitions regarding night workers, those are the ones that apply.
What's unslaughtered meat? Live?
No, like an animal that you shoot dead, that dies, hasn't been butchered, kosher.
Right.
Exactly. So that was opinion number one in our Mishnah, was that all prohibitions apply to rentals. Ger toshav, however, would only have certain prohibitions. The Tana Kama of a brisa that we saw yesterday said all prohibitions apply to both categories. And Rabbi Yossi said, no, not all prohibitions apply to either category. So again, we had three different viewpoints. And we finally explained that the Tana of our Mishnah must be a Tana from Rabbi Yishmael's academy, from Rabbi Yishmael's yeshiva. And so we then explained how it is that our Mishnah, how the Tana of our Mishnah derives his teaching. But based on that teaching, we now need to go back to our analysis of the Tana Kama of the Brisa and say, because in the Tana Kama of our Brisa, again, he says that all the prohibitions apply to each category. We used a word when we were explaining the Tana of our Mishnah, the word re'acha, to limit the scope of the laws that apply.
Oh,
But if our Tana in our Mishnah uses that word to limit the scope of the laws that apply, why doesn't the Tanakama of the Brisa? Meaning, what does the Tanakama of the Brisa do with that word? Because he has all the prohibitions apply to both categories. And that's where we're going to begin. So we're going to begin the Tanakama. It is 1, 2, 3. Well, let's actually count from the narrow lines. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 narrow lines up on the bottom of Kuf Yud Aleph on the bet. The Tanakama Demeachecha, that the Tanakama who learns, who uses, where when it comes to Meachecha, he uses that term to say that all the prohibitions apply even to a ger toshav. Hai reacha, my amdilei. What does he do with the term reacha of our friend, or of the person who's with you? So that should limit that. So why doesn't that limit it? So look at the Tanya. He needs that word reacha for another person. Reacha below amaleki. It teaches us that the prohibitions only apply to another Jew, not to somebody who's not Jewish. Although it says Amaleki, which is sort of like the worst kind of non-Jew, it doesn't mean it literally. It means anybody who's not Jewish. So Amaleki me'achecha nafka. Well, 1 second, can't you tell that somebody from Amalek, somebody who's not Jewish, is going to be already excluded from the prohibition of withholding wages based on the fact that it says me'achecha, that we already have, that it has to be your brother? So chad mishra oshko, v'chad mishra gzelo. That one time, the word me'achecha, tells us that you're allowed to retain the Amalek, the non-Jews' earnings and not pay him. And one says that you're allowed to actually rob him. And we need both. Why do we need both? Because if the Torah were just to tell us that you're allowed to steal from a non-Jew, mishum delo tarach, that's because presumably the non-Jew never actually earned the item and probably stole it for himself. And that, this is part of the reason why when we say Amaleki, you can understand it as being sort of like a truly godless person that has no laws associated with it, no moral compass whatsoever. I like that. Aval oshko de tarakabe, but when it comes to retaining his wages, maybe you wouldn't aim a low. Maybe you would say that's not permitted because after all, he did do the work. The iyashmain and oshko, and so we need to have both of them from that perspective. But iyashmain and oshko, and if we were to tell him that you could withhold the wages, maybe that would be mishum delo asal yadeh, because that money never was in the non-Jew's hand. Aval gazelo, but if you were to actually steal it right out of the person's hand to asal yadeh, because which got to his hand, aim alone, maybe you would not be allowed to do it. So therefore, tzricha, we need to be told both prohibitions do not apply to a Jew. Now, again, in our modern world, we actually say that these prohibitions do apply, in part because we don't want people to not like us, and so we don't.
you pay the man his wages and you don't bring him back.
Exactly. If you don't like it, you don't bring
him back.
Exactly. All right, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. So now we've gone back and explained how the Tanakama can still say all prohibitions apply, both to rentals and to ger toshav, notwithstanding the fact that we had the word reacha, and that you might think would exclude ger toshav. So now we need to consider, what about the word itacha? Itacha was used in order to expand the category of rentals. So and the fact that the prohibitions apply to all kinds of rentals. So why doesn't Rabbi Yossi, who doesn't have an expanded view of the prohibitions that apply to rentals, why doesn't he use itacha the way everybody else does? So that's the question that we're going to deal with now. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Hai lo salin pu'ula sachir itecha ad boker, that the wage of a hired worker shall not stay overnight with you until morning. So again, that was used by the Tana of our Mishnah to include rental payments for animals and utensils because of the term with you, meaning that it's something else beyond the person's work himself. So my Abedlay, how does he deal with that? What does he do with that? So that shouldn't he also use that term in order to expand the prohibition? So mi boile, look at the Ravasi. He uses it the way Ravasi says. Da'amar Ravasi afiu lo scharo ela livtzur lo eshkol lo eshkol echad shal anavim over mishum bal talim. That Rav Asi says that even if you hire somebody to pick one bunch of grapes, and you don't pay that person on time,
You're wrong.
You're wrong. You
Absolutely.
violated the prohibition. And so, because I might have thought that if you do something so small, that all right, so what difference does it make? No, it makes a difference. The idach. So all right, so he learns that from itecha. So that's how Rabbi Yossi learns Rav Asi's teaching. So ve'idach, what about the Tana of our Mishnah? How does he learn Rav Asi's teaching? So he learns it the elav hu noseas nafsho nafka. He learns it from the fact that he risks his life. This is a pasuk in Dvarim, Perakav Daled, pasuk Tesvav. Davar hamoser nafsho alav. That any matter for which the person commits his life, meaning that he's dedicated to doing it. It doesn't make a difference how long he's spending.
Correct.
He's spending even just a moment on it. That's enough. The idach. What about? Okay, so fine. So now we've learned that the Tana Rabbi Yossi, he learns Rav Asi's lesson from the pasuk in Dvarim Perik Kaf Daled pasuk Tesvav. Well, what in the world does the I'm sorry, that's what the Tana of our Mishnah, the Tana of our Mishnah learns Rav Asi's teaching. Rabbi Yossi, who learns Rav Asi's teaching from the word itecha, what does he do with the Dvarim Perakav Daled pasuk Tesvav? What does he do with it? V'idach, as we turn to Kuf Yud Bet Amud Aleph, v'idach hahumi b'ilei l'k'tetanya. He needs it like the following price. So the following price is going to give us two different other interpretations of what we can learn from ve'elav hu noseas nafsho. So ve'elav hu noseas nafsho, v'nei ma Allah zeh b'kevesh. It's an explanation of why people do things. Meaning, why do people take chances in life? They take chances in life because there's some benefit that's associated with it. Why does a worker climb a ramp in order to get to work? Unvinitla be'ilan, or hang from a tree. Umasaras atzmo lamisa, putting himself in danger of dying, of getting killed. Lo al scharo, isn't it done in order to get paid? That's the teaching that ve'elav hu noseas nafsho. Davar acher, alternatively, we can explain ve'elav hu noseas nafsho, that he's risking his life on that. Kol hakovesh schar sachir ki'ilu notel nafsho mimenu. That anybody who withholds a wage, it's like he's taking his life. Now, the question is whose life is he taking? Well, there's a debate between Rav Huna and Rav Chisda. So let's take a look at the debate. Rav Huna and Rav Chisda, they debate. Chad amar nafsho shel gazlan. That the point is that the pasuk is telling us that when you withhold somebody's wage, you're withholding your own life. That that if I were to, God forbid, withhold the wage of Mark, I would be risking myself in doing that. No, I'm not risking myself. I'm risking Mark because Mark needs the money in order to be able to live. So Manda Amar Nafsho Shel Gazlan, the one who says that you're risking your own life as a thief, because we have a pasuk. We're now going to cite two psukim in Mishlei. The pasuk says in Mishlei, Al tigzal dal kidalhu. Don't steal from the poor. He's poor. Ba'al tidakei ani b'shar. And don't oppress the poor in the gate. And uchsiv. And what's the next verse say? Ki Hashem yariv rivam. Hashem will fight their fights. Hashem will fight the fight on behalf of those who are poor. V'kava es kovehem, and will rob the life, kovehem nefesh, and will rob the life of those who rob them. So as a result, the point is that shows that if you try to withhold the wage of somebody else, it's like Hashem is going to rob your life. So that's first explanation. Uman damer nafsho shel nigzal. And the one who says, no, you're not stealing your own life, you're stealing the life of the victim. Diksiv, because we have another pasuk in Mishlei. Kain archos kol botseya batza, as nefesh ba'alav yikach. That the ways of anyone who is greedy of gain, he takes away the life of the owner of items, meaning that the life is taken of the victim. V'idach nami haksiv as nefesh ba'alav yikach. Well, 1 second. So how does each of these opinions deal with the verse cited by the other person? So ba'alav, haksiv as nefesh ba'alav yikach. It says that you're taking away the life of its owner. So ba'alav dahashta. When the Mishlei says that if you take that you're taking away the life of the owner of the item, it doesn't mean the original owner of the item, namely the victim. It means you're taking the life of the person who's holding the stolen item now. That's the thief. So as a result, we can say that both psukim are really talking about the life of the thief. So v'idach nami. Well, 1 second. What about in the other direction? V'haksiva kava es kovehem nafesh. That the Hashem is going to rob the life of those who rob them, implying the life of the robber. No, matam ka'amar. The Torah is giving us the reason. Matam kava es kovehem. Why is it that Hashem is going to rob and punish the robbers? Mishum denatlo nefesh. It's because the robbers have effectively taken somebody else's life. And so as a result, that's it's because of nafesh. So why is kava es kovehem? Why is Hashem going to punish them? Nafesh. It's because the robbers took away the life of the victim. Oh. So as a result, we can read both verses in a manner that's consistent with each of the two different opinions. Okay, so that is the next piece. And now we go on to the fact that the next section of the Mishnah. So we're at the 2 dots at Tana Rabbanan on Kuf Yubet Amud Aleph. And
it seemed like it just explained both Pesukim that
we've explained both
against the robber again, and neither one of them talked about the nigzal.
That's the second version, right? The second version, this most recent version is saying is both focused on the nigzal. Let's take a look and we'll see how it works, right? The problem is it sounds the koveas kovehem nafesh, meaning that Hashem is going to rob the life of those who robbed somebody else's life. So don't read it that way, but rather read it as matam kamer. It's giving you the reason. Tam kaves koveim. Why is God going to punish robbers? Mishum did not lu nafesh, because they take away the life of the victim. So that's the nigzal. So the point is, we've now explained both verses.
So he's going to punish the gazlan.
Yes, of course, God's not going to punish the gazlan, but why is God going to punish the gazlan? Not that God is going to punish the gazlan by taking away his life, but he's going to punish the gazlan because the gazlan took away the life of the victim by withholding the wages. So that, therefore, we're going to say that both verses can now be consistent, both with the fact that the life of the robbers being taken, or that when you withhold somebody's wages, it's like you're taking the life of the victim. So both directions can be consistent with both verses. Okay, so aim aside. So when did we say in our Mishnah that it's true that you're going to be violating the prohibition of withholding wages? Bisman shetivao, when the worker asks for his wages, lo tva'o, if he doesn't ask for his wages, eino over alav, you have not yet violated the prohibition against delaying payment. So Tanu Rabbanan, we learned in a brisa, lo talin pu'ulas sachir. You should not, the wage of an employee, you should not stay with you overnight. Yochol afil lo tva'o. I might have thought that even if this verse, which is we've only quoted part of, that verse would tell us that you can't withhold the wages at all. Talmud Lomar itecha. The next word of the pasuk is itecha, right? Lo sashok esreacha, below sigzol, below salin pu'ulas sachir itecha. It's with you. L'da'atcha, to tell you that it's you who are determining whether or not it's staying. Well, if the employee never asks for it, then it's not you who's determining who's holding it. Your employee hasn't asked for it, and so as a result, you're not holding it against the will of the employee. So yachol afilu ein lo. Now, another aspect that we can learn from itecha, I might have thought that the prohibition applies even if you don't have the money, even if you don't have the cash on hand to pay the employee. Talmud Lomer itecha. What the prohibition only applies if you are holding the money and don't give it. Sheyesh itecha. It's only what you have with you. If you have cash, then you're going to be violating the prohibition. If you don't have cash, you might violate some other prohibition, but at least this prohibition you aren't violating because you don't have the funds right with you. And I might have thought that if I send my worker to my payroll office, so let's say I use either a storefront or a storekeeper or a money changer in order to handle the payment of my workers. So maybe you would say that if the storekeeper or money changer holds on to the money, that would be my violation. Talmud Lomar itecha. Again, it has to be with you, the money. Lo shehimchahu eitzel chenveni ve'etzel shulchani. Not when you tell the worker to go to a storekeeper or a money changer to get paid. Now, obviously, if you haven't actually worked out the details and you're just not paying the person, then that's not that I think that you would, that's still not kosher, right? So okay, so that's that piece. And now,
So Rabbi, this seems like it's a little bit different from the case of a simple loan, where if I appoint an agent to collect a loan, I may even sell the loan. The person can still pay me. So there's no such thing as a full securitization of a loan. But here it seems like I can just tell them that my agent is handling your pay, and you can go there.
That is correct, that there's a difference. I will note that there's that although I believe the halacha is as you just outlined, there's a machlokes on that particular point on whether or not you can fully sell a loan. But if you appoint an agent to to administer, the question is this truly an agent, or does this person, does the storekeeper or money changer effectively become the liable person? And so that's effectively the legal question. But you're right that it's not symmetric, meaning if the worker owed me and I said, listen, don't pay me, pay my storekeeper or my money changer, he would still have the right to pay me directly because he owes me. And I think
now
that's
that your agent might be able to sue you in Beit Din if you actually sold him the loan, right?
Yes, and that if I as opposed to an agency, if instead I had sold the loan to somebody else, and the person still, and the debtor still decided to pay me, so then I would owe that money to the person to whom I sold the loan. Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so himcho eitzel chenveni ve'etzel shulchani eino over. So we said in our Mishnah that if you send the worker to the payroll office, you are not going to violate the law. So we buy lahu. Choser, oh, ain't no choser. So what's the story? If now that payroll office, Rashi says, if we take a look in Rashi, it's 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18 lines down or so in Rashi. Choser, hasachir eitzer balabayas. If the employee returns to the employer, imlo nasan hachenveni, if the storekeeper doesn't actually give the money that he's supposed to give, v'nischayev balabayas l'sholim, that the employer is supposed to pay. So what happens if that happens? Does the employee have the right to come back to the employer? Oh, eino choser, or does he not? Rav Sheshes Amar, Rav Sheshes says a choser. I'm sorry, eino choser. Rav Sheshes says he's not allowed to. But Rabba Omer choser, and Rabba says no, he's allowed to go back. And indeed, it seems like that's the way we paskin. So Amar Rabba, mina. How do I know that you're allowed to go back? Midagatani eino over alav, because our Mishnah says that you don't transgress. Ma'avar hudelo avar. The transgression doesn't apply. Hadar. But if he comes back and because he didn't get paid, you still owe the guy. Rav Sheshes Amar Mayeno Over. Rav Sheshes says, no, that's not the interpretation of our Mishnah. When we say Eno Over, Eno B'Toras La'ovor, there's no further possibility of your transgressing because you no longer have the obligation at all. So because you don't owe the worker anything, you've hired a payroll office. So boy minei Rav Sheshes. So they asked Rav Sheshes, Kablanut, what happens if you do contractual work? Do we say the same thing? Do we say that you over alav mishum bal talin? If you delay paying, is it considered bad? Oh, eino over mishum bal talin. Or do you not violate? Because after all, we're going to see that maybe there's a reason to distinguish somebody who's working on a job by the piece, or sort of like a job-based as opposed to an effort-based calculation. So
the gig economy.
What?
The gig economy.
A gig economy, yes. Well, it's a little bit different than even a gig economy, but because even in a gig economy, right, you could pay based on the amount of effort that's involved. That's, so for example, like if you hire Uber, there's an amount of effort that's involved based on the distance that you travel, etc. Here we're talking about where you pay a gig economy, where you pay somebody to make a coat for you.
Piecework.
A piecework, exactly. A piece, so you're paying on the
Like
piece.
Garment industry.
Correct, in the garment industry, exactly. And that's, of course, we're going to talk about that. So, Uman Kohen and Bishvachli, do we say that the worker effectively acquires a piece of the item on which he is working? So, for example, if I take your jacket and you ask me to put on sleeves on it, and now I've taken what was a sleeveless jacket and made it into a sleeve jacket, do I own a piece of that because I've improved the item? So if we say that I do own a piece, the halvahi. So now when I give it back to you, or when we have the finished product, it's like a loan. I've loaned you the money and I'm holding collateral. Oh, eino uman kona bishvachli. Or do we say, no, I don't have any piece of the jacket that I created, uschirusi, and everything that you pay me is a wage because I'm not holding anything of yours. There's no loan associated with it. So Amar lahu Rav Sheshes over. Rav Sheshes says that you are violating the prohibition if you don't pay on time. But Tanya ain't over. 1 second, we have a brisa that seems to say that you don't violate it. So Hasam Shimcho Eitzel Chenveni ve'Eitzel Shulchani. No, that case where we said that you don't transgress is where you sent the employee to the storekeeper or money changer in order to pay the guy back. Okay, so that is how Rosh Hashem's ruled. Name a Messiah. Let's say that the following brisa supports Rav Sheshes to say that it's a prohibition. Hanosin taliso le'uman, you give a jacket, a coat to a worker, some garment to the worker. Gemara v'hodio. If he finishes it and he tells the owner, even if the guy waits 10 days, Eino over mishum bal talin, there's no violation for withholding the wage because the person is still holding the garment. However, if the worker gives the item back in the middle of the day, when the sun sets, over mishum bal talin. If you haven't paid the worker, if the owner hasn't paid the worker, then you violated the prohibition. The amrat uman kona b'shvach kli. But if you tell me that the worker takes a position, takes an ownership position in the vessel, amai over, why is he violating? After all, what we can say is a loan is happening here, right? I own the sleeves of your jacket. I now give you the jacket. And so what I've done is I've given you a loan because I've given you my portion of the jacket. And now you've borrowed that from me and you pay me back by giving me money. And that makes everything work. So so why should that be why should, if you delay, there be any violation of withholding wages? You're not withholding wages, you're withholding the payment of a loan. Now, that's not a good thing either, but it's not the same thing. So Amarav Mari Brei de Rav Kahana, Bigarda de Sarbala, we're dealing with teaseling of a cloth, meaning that there's a process of basically scraping a cloth that turns a heavier cloth that is thick and less nimble, more coarse, but also less soft. Course is not is a harder document and not as comfortable. Turns it into a very comfortable document, comfortable garment, and so that's what we're talking about. So Lamaya Hava Nihale. Well, 1 second. And the point is that, and Rashi explains, Begarda de Sarbala, we'll skip the old French. She'ain, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, about 14 lines up in Rashi. She'ain kan sheva kli. There's no benefit to the garment. There's no improvement in the value of the garment. Shim haya minicho kamot shehu, because if the garment had stayed in its original format, it would last a lot longer because it may be rougher, but it would be much more sturdy. Now that you've scraped it, you've actually made it less durable. So Lamayava now, well, 1 second. If you've made it a worse document, worse garment, why would you in fact give the garment to the worker at all? Obviously, you prefer it this way. So Rakuche, you gave it to him to soften it. Hainu shvache, that's the benefit. You wouldn't have paid for him to do it otherwise. So clearly the garment is worth more when it's soft, even if it might not last as long. So as a result, that does not give us a good answer to our question. And so again, we have to ask, why is it that if the coat was given back in the middle of the day, is there a violation if we're going to say that the worker acquires improvement in the utensil? So lo tzricha de ka'agre mine levatushe. That the point is that we hired the person in order to stamp it, meaning to put to and bitcha uvitcha b'masa, and each stamping, it receives some amount of payment, meaning that this is not in fact contractual work at all. So although we tried to prove our Rav Sheshes from a brisa, we haven't actually successfully done so. But nonetheless, it seems like the halacha follows Rav Sheshes, and if you were to withhold the wages of an employee who you hired for piecework, you would be violating the Torah prohibition. Okay, so Sechir Bismano Nishba Venotel. We said that if you hire somebody and the worker claims before the money is due that you owe him the money, and you say, I did not, I already paid you, but it was before the money was due, we allow the worker to make an oath and to take the money. This is different from usual situations. Right. Usually, we have an oath by the one who is claimed against, and we allow the oath to prevent the person from having to pay. So we're going to analyze that right now. Sachir amai takinu le rabbanan lemishta v'shakil. Why did the rabbis allow him to swear and take? So, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, halachot gedolot shanukan. This is a really big and important law that we are teaching here. Now, the issue is that term halachot usually means some kind of halacha from the Torah. So, hani hilchas ninu, are you telling me this is a halacha? Hainu takanos ninu, this is an enactment. This is a rabbinic decree. So, Ella Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, takanot gedolot shanukan. This is a very important, major enactment. Gedolos, what do you mean major? Miklal de'ika katanos, are you going to tell me that now that some decrees that the rabbis make are not important, are minor? No. So Ella Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. So Rav Nachman comes to the rescue of Rav Yehuda and says, no, here's what Shmuel actually said. Takanot kavuot shanukan. That this is a long-lasting, this is an important takana. Now, what does that mean? Take a look at takanot kavuot in Rashi, 4th line on Kuf Yubet Amud Bet. Roi la'asotan keva. This la'akor alayim davar min Torah. This is an appropriate rule that should have permanence in order to uproot a rule that we would have from the Torah. Demid de oraisa, because from the Torah, mi sheyesh alav l'shalem, the one who is supposed to pay, hu nishba, he's the one who swears. Diksiv v'lakach ba'alav v'lo yishalem, that the owner will take the oath and not pay. V'haka shaklua l'shvua mibal habayit v'sheduya v'shediyua asachir, that we took away the oath from the employer and we put it on the employee. Okay, so shvua de balabayasi, really back into the Gemara, right? So we are now 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down. First word on the line on Kuf Yud Bet Amud Bet. Shvua de balabayati, right? The akarua rabbanan l'shvua de balabayat v'sheduya asachir mishum kidei chayav desachir. That we took the oath that was supposed to be on the employer and we moved it to the employee in order to facilitate the livelihood of the employee. Umishum kidei chayav desachir. What do you mean in order to improve the employee of the livelihood of the employee? Mafsadana leila balabayas. You're causing a loss to the employer. Why? How can you allow that?
But so isn't it normally? Don't we normally learn a motzi mechavero alav araya? So in this case,
absolutely, 100%.
So in this case, and this is similar, that the worker is owed the money in a case where someone feels that he should get money. He makes the shavua to take the money from the other person.
100%.
This seems completely logical.
Correct, 100%. What? How can we have this at all? Illogical, I assume you meant.
No,
right?
It's a no, because it's the worker.
If you say a motzi mechavero of a raya, an oath is not a raya. An oath is not proof. But we say a person takes shavua in order to claim what is his. But no.
So in this case,
very rarely Very rarely do we allow somebody to swear and take something that belongs to him. Usually the person who's holding the item swears and then retains ownership of the item. This is different. That's exactly what this Gemara is telling us, that it's not logical. That's exactly the Gemara's point, is that we're taking something that is supposed to be an oath that the employer makes to be able to withhold the employee's wages and make an oath and say that I don't owe you, and he's supposed to be able to then we would say hamotzi mechavero alavaraya. You have to bring proof, employee, if you're in fact owed money. You can't just swear and take. So the point is that, but we've allowed that. So how can we allow that?
But we talked about earlier where a person makes an oath and then he can take.
Yes, that's that's the case that we're talking about. An employee is allowed to make an oath and take, but that is very atypical. It is not a typical situation. The vast majority of situations, if I say, Ken, remember that loan that I gave you $100 for? You owe me money. And you say, no, I don't owe you anything. The Shvuas Hesses that we make you swear is for you to swear that you don't owe, and then you don't pay, and that's the rabbinic oath. The vast majority of oaths, and let's say you admit to owing me 50, so you have an oath from the Torah that you need to swear. Again, you're the one who swears. I don't swear and then collect. You swear and you get to keep the money. So the point is, the only time that we make the change, remember, was when you couldn't swear. If you were to say something like, listen, I have no recollection whatsoever, then we might allow me to swear and to claim from you. But in ordinary cases, we don't allow that. So that's what we're trying to understand. Why did we move the oath from the employer to the employee to allow the employee to swear and collect? That's not a typical thing that we do.
We have two people holding the talit in the beginning of the Masechta, right? So yeah. And then they argue about it, and they take an oath to claim what they think belongs to them.
No, they take an oath that what they're already holding is theirs.
Right.
They both swear that what they've got in their hand, that at least half of the talis belongs to them.
Correct.
Right? They're swearing on what they're already holding. You're just proving the point of this Gemara, that it's very odd to allow somebody to swear and take away from somebody else. Right? That's what's happening here. The employee is swearing and taking away from the employer. Okay, so umishum kidei chayav desacher mifsadna leila balabayas. How can we do this? We're imposing a loss on the employer. So balabayas gufei nichale demishtaba sacher v'shakto. Actually, the employer wants the employee to be able to swear and get his wages. Because that's how he's going to find a lot of workers, because workers will want to work for somebody who allows them to swear and take. Well, Sachir Gufei. Well, one second, let's reverse the whole thing. Why shouldn't we say that the employee will want the oath to go in the other direction? Because he'll be more attractive as an employee. That an employee who allows the employer to swear and withhold the wages will be more attractive as an employee. So, balabayas al karche agar. No, well, one second. The employer, he has to hire workers. He's the one who needs them. Well, you can say the exact same thing in the other direction. Sachir nami bal karche itagar. The worker also, he needs to make a living. So as a result, we're going to undo all of this. And we're going to offer now effectively a fourth answer of why the rabbis instituted that the worker can swear and get paid. Ela bala bias tarud b'poalimhu. He's busy. He's going to be very occupied with making sure that all the work gets done. And because of that, he is not going to, he might make a mistake and not realize that he had not paid the guy, even though he's swearing that he did. Well, ihachi nesav le below shvua. Well, why not let the employee get the wages without having to swear? No, well, we need that oath by the employee in order to make the employer feel better. Because if we said that because the employer just can't remember who got paid and who didn't, that he's going to swear falsely that he paid this guy when really he meant that he paid a different guy. So maybe we shouldn't have any oath at all. And when the employee makes a claim, we'll just have the employer pay out. But that will be upsetting to the employer. So as a result, we put an oath on the employee and everybody's happy. Well, why not just say that always we're going to have the employer pay in front of witnesses. And that way you'll never have a problem. Trichalahu milsa, that's a big pain. That's where, why would we want, nobody wants that. That would make a lot of work for everybody. So why not just have all payments happen at the very beginning of the job? And that way everybody knows that they've been paid immediately, meaning you don't start work without paying, right? That in some ways that's a little bit more modern age that we're in, where often if you hire somebody, you bring in somebody, they need to be paid at the beginning. Shneim rotzim ba'akafa. Actually, both of them appreciate having the payment be due at the end. As Rashi says, 1, 2, 3, 5 lines up, Shneim rotzim ba'akafa. Balabayas, the employer appreciates that paying at the end, because pamim she'ein lo. Sometimes he doesn't have the money at the very beginning. He only is going to earn the money at the end, and so that this facilitates him still hiring them. Upoel shema yiplu mimenu, and the worker appreciates it because he's working. He doesn't want to have to keep track of his wages while he's working. Maybe he'll drop it and he'll lose it. This way he gets paid at the end. So, ihachi afilu katzatznami. Well, 1 second. What happens if you set up the if the debate is about the amount of wages? In a case where the debate is about the amount of wages, we don't say that the employee can swear and take, because listen to what we have in this brisa. Alama Tanya, we have the following. Why does it say in the following brisa? Uman omer shtayim katzatztali. The worker says, you said you're going to pay me 2. V'hala omer lo katzatztalicha ela achas. I only told you I was going to pay you 1. Hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. Right? We say that the one who has to collect has the burden of proof. You want to try and get that second coin from the employer. You have to. You can't just swear. You need to bring proof. Katzitza vaday midkar dechirele inshi. No, recognizing the amount. That's something that people remember. Meaning, we've now distinguished between 2 cases. If you were to tell me that I paid you, maybe because I've got 100 employees and I paid one of them, I won't remember which of them I paid a little bit early.
Makes sense.
But I know how much I promised each employee because I know what job I've given to each employee. So as a result, if you tell me the wrong amount, I know that. And so as a result, that's why we're going to say in that case, hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. Well, ihachi afilu avar zmano nami. Well, based on this whole thing, why did we distinguish in our Mishnah that if the time already passed and I already was supposed to have paid you already, right. Now when you come and you say, you didn't pay me, David, I can say, no, yes, I did pay you. We don't allow you to swear and take. And we don't allow you to swear and take because because the due time was already. So as a result, we're going to trust my memory. Alama tanan avers mano eno nishba v'notel. That once the time has passed, the worker cannot swear and take. Chazaka, we have a presumption, ain bala bias over mishum baltalin, where the employer is not going to violate the Torah prohibition of delaying payment. So as a result, he knows that he's going to pay all his workers before the payment time is due. Or when the payment time is due. Well, once again, but we said that he's busy with his workers, so maybe he won't have done so. That when we say that he's preoccupied and won't remember, that's only before the time to pay. As we turn to Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, Rami Anafshe Midkar, when he knows that it's time for him to pay, because if he doesn't pay, he's going to violate a Torah prohibition. You better believe that he's going to make sure he remembers everything accordingly. Well, one second, why don't we say on the other side that the employee is not going to violate the prohibition against robbing? No, Hasam Trechazke, we have two presumptions that favor the employer, and one, whereas the employee only has one presumption. Gabi Bala Bayasika Trechazake, the employer has two, because Chada De'ain Bala Bayas over Mishum Baltalin. One is we're not going to have the employer is not going to want to violate holding wages. And second, the employee isn't going to delay in trying to get his wages. As soon as they're due, he's going to claim. And so now that he's claiming only after they were due, not when they were due, so we're going to have, there's a presumption against him. Whereas the employee only has one chazaka, namely that he wouldn't steal. And so as a result, we've now finished our analysis of that piece, and we have one last piece of analysis, that what happens if there are witnesses. When there are witnesses, we will still allow the employee to swear and collect. And so, but for the analysis of that piece of our Mishnah, please stay tuned for tomorrow's daf.
Yasher Koach and Mazal Tov.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Yes.
Mazel tov, Yasher Koyach.
Thank you so much. Be well.